Welcome to Sting Stories. Today we will listen to a very profound and sacred story titled The Passion and the Cross. This is a journey full of pain, but also full of boundless love, when Jesus accepted persecution, unjust trial, crowned with thorns, carried the cross, and was crucified. All of this was not because of his sins, but because of his love for humanity. He sacrificed himself to take on the sins of the world. Let's listen, contemplate, and feel the message of love, sacrifice, and salvation that God gave us through the cross. Part 1. The beginning of the way of the Passion. That night in the quiet Garden of Gethsemane, as the moonlight cast a pale yellow light over each leaf, Jesus sat praying. His heart was heavy, as if he were bearing the pain of humanity. Drops of sweat dripping down to the ground signaled an extremely fierce trial approaching. The disciples were still sleeping, not understanding that their teacher was entering a decisive moment for the entire history of salvation. In a fervent prayer, Jesus raised his eyes to heaven. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." The sound of footsteps shattered the peaceful atmosphere. Torches flickered, swords and spears flashed, and Judas, the once-loved disciple, approached. A betrayal kiss was placed on the master's cheek, turning into a sign of surrender. Jesus calmly, without resistance, let the soldiers tie him up. Peter swung his sword and cut off a soldier's ear, but Jesus said, "Put your sword back in its place. All who take up the sword will perish by the sword." Then he healed the wound of his captor, a final act of love on the night of betrayal. He was bound and led away into the night. It all began. The way of the cross was open. Part 2. Unjust Judgment. Jesus was brought before the Sanhedrin. The powerful sat on the benches, their eyes scrutinizing him, trying to find a way to accuse him. False witnesses were heard, overlapping and contradicting each other, but they still tried to convict him. The high priest tore his clothes and shouted, "This man is blaspheming. What more evidence do you need? What do you think?" The whole council said in unison, "He deserves death. He deserves death." They spat in his face, slapped him, and mocked him. "Prophesy. Who hit you?" An atmosphere of violence and hatred prevailed. The innocent man became the condemned. At dawn, they brought Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. Pilate examined him, questioned him, and said, "I find no guilt in this man." But the crowd shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate, fearing to lose the people's favor, sent Jesus to Herod. The king was curious, hoping to see a miracle. But when Jesus remained silent, he scorned him, wrapped him in a splendid robe as if it were a joke, and sent him back to Pilate. Once again, Pilate was faced with a choice. He had Jesus flogged, hoping that this would be enough. But the crowd shouted even louder, "Crucify him! We have only one king, Caesar." Finally, Pilate washed his hands before the people. "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is up to you," but he himself had signed the death warrant, handing over a righteous man to the cross. Part 3. Carrying the cross. The whip whistled through the air, falling on his back, leaving long streaks of blood. Jesus' body was exhausted, his flesh was torn. He was dressed in a dark red cloak, and on his head was a crown of sharp thorns. The thorns dug deep into his flesh. Blood oozed out, running down his gentle face. The soldiers laughed, knelt down and mocked, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They handed him a reed, then snatched it from him and hit him hard on the head. Jesus remained silent, not responding. That silence was not weakness, but the strength of love, accepting suffering on behalf of humanity. Finally, the death sentence was carried out. People handed Jesus a heavy cross, the burden of countless sins of humanity. He began to walk on the road to Golgotha. The road was narrow, the ground was rough. The crowd jostled and cheered. Some laughed, others sympathized. Jesus fell under the weight of the cross. Blood and sweat mixed together, covering the ground. But then he got up and continued walking. Along the way, there was a man named Simon of Cyrene who was forced by the soldiers to help carry the cross. He was reluctant, but at that moment, he was touched by the mystery of salvation, becoming a silent companion of the Savior. There were women of Jerusalem weeping for him. Jesus stopped, although his body was exhausted, but his eyes still shone with love. He said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children." Once again, he did not think of himself, but of the people, of the future, of the suffering they would endure. He fell once more. The wood was too heavy, his legs were weak, but he still stood up, still walked, step by step, as if the whole sky was pressing down on his shoulders. Each step is a step of steadfast love, a sacrifice accepted to the end. When we reach the place called Golgotha, meaning Skull Hill, the way of the cross comes to an end. But it is also the place where love is fully expressed. Part 4. Crucifixion and the 7 last words on the cross. On the top of Golgotha Hill, the sky was as gray as if it were about to collapse. Crowds gathered, some curious, some gloating, some sympathetic. In the midst of that scene, Jesus, his body full of wounds, his legs trembling, was stripped of his cloak. The wounds from the whip were torn open and bleeding, burning. The soldiers laid him on his back on the cross. The sound of hammers echoed loudly, driving nails through his hands that had once healed the sick, that had once raised up to bless. Cold iron nails pierced his feet, feet that had gone everywhere preaching the gospel, searching for sinners. Each hammer blow seemed to reverberate into heaven and earth, as if wanting to tear apart the hearts of all mankind. The cross was raised. His body hung suspended, heavy and heavy. Pain rushed in, his breathing was intermittent. Yet from the cross, not curses, but words of forgiveness resound. First words, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Amidst the laughter and insults, Jesus did not resent, but only prayed for his tormentors. Love overcame hatred, transforming the cross into a throne of mercy. Beside him were 2 criminals. One mocked him, "If you are the Christ, save yourself and us." But the other, humbled, recognizing his innocence, whispered, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus turned, his eyes filled with hope. Second words, "Truly today you will be with me in paradise." A sinner, in his last moments, was saved by faith and repentance. The cross became the door that opened to heaven. At the foot of the cross, Mary stood there. The mother's heart was broken when she saw her beloved son in pain. Next to her was John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. In his agony, Jesus still remembered his mother and entrusted her to humanity. Third word, "Woman, here is your son. Here is your mother." From that moment, Mary became the mother of the whole church, the mother of every believer. The sun was hot, his throat was dry with thirst, and much blood had been lost. Jesus uttered a very human word. Fourth word, "I thirst." Not only a physical thirst, but also a thirst for love, a thirst for the human soul to return to God. The soldier offered him a sponge soaked in vinegar, but he still accepted it. The sky suddenly darkened, as if the whole universe sympathized with the pain of the Son of God. In that darkness, Jesus cried out in a heartbreaking voice. Fifth word, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This is the cry of the utmost loneliness. When bearing the sins of all humanity, he felt distant from the Father. But in that emptiness, love is still complete. He accepts to go to the very end of loneliness to embrace us. Then with all the strength left, the Lord utters, sixth word, "It is finished." The mission of salvation has been completed. He has loved to the end, has taken on everything, has paid the price for the sins of humanity. Finally, his breath gradually fades. The Lord raises his eyes to heaven, completely entrusting himself into the Father's arms. Seventh word, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." After saying this, he bows his head and dies. The earth shakes, the ground splits, the tombs open. The curtain in the temple is torn in two, signaling the new covenant established in the blood of the Son of God. The Roman centurion standing nearby, witnessing all this, exclaimed, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." On Golgotha, love reigned. Part 5. Death, Burial, and Message of Meditation 1. Death and Burial. When Jesus died, the sky was strangely dark. Strong winds arose, the earth shook, and the whole universe seemed to groan. On the cross, his body hung there, a broken body, but containing boundless love. The Roman soldiers approached. According to the law, they had to break the legs of criminals to hasten their death. 2 thieves were crucified on either side, their legs broken. The horrible sound of bones breaking rang out. But when they approached Jesus, they saw that he was dead. A soldier took a spear and pierced his side, and immediately blood and water flowed out. That blood washed away the sins of mankind. That water opened up new life. That evening, there was a rich and devout man named Joseph of Arimathea. He courageously came to Pilate and asked for permission to take Jesus' body. Along with him, Nicodemus, who had come to Jesus in the dark to seek the truth, also appeared, bringing spices and oil to anoint the body. They carefully removed the nails and lowered the body of Jesus. Mother Mary held her son in her arms. It was a moment of ultimate sorrow. The mother held her dead son in her arms. Her heart was bleeding, but she still believed that this was not the end, but the door that opened to hope. Joseph and Nicodemus took a cloth to wrap the body of Jesus, anointed it with spices, and placed him in a newly hewn tomb in the rock, which no one had used. A large stone was rolled in front of the tomb. Darkness covered it. Outside, soldiers were watching carefully, but nothing could lock God's love. 2. Message and reflection. The Passion and the Cross are not just a painful page in history, but the pinnacle of love. On the cross, Jesus took on the sins of humanity, from the smallest to the most terrible. He took on human selfishness, hatred, betrayal, injustice, greed, to turn them all into salvation. In the eyes of the world, the cross is only a symbol of shame and defeat. But in the plan of salvation, it becomes the tree of life, the key that opens heaven. The cross teaches that true love always goes hand in hand with sacrifice. Forgiveness is stronger than hatred. Humility is greater than pride. Death does not have the last word, but love is the ultimate victory. Every last word of Jesus on the cross is a lamp that illuminates human life. Forgive your enemies. Open the door for repentant sinners. Give your mother to humanity. Long for the return of souls. Accept loneliness to embrace us. Fulfill the mission with fidelity. Surrender completely into God's hands. The cross is not only Jesus's, but also each of us's. Every cross we carry, whether it be suffering, trial, loss, can become a path to love and salvation if we know how to accept it with faith. 3. Conclusion. Invitation. Today, when contemplating Jesus' suffering and death on the cross, we are not only shocked by a tragic event in history, but are also invited to go deeper. Dare to look at ourselves to recognize the times when we are like the crowd, like Peter who denied the master, like Judas who betrayed, or like Pilate who was cowardly. Dare to live sacrificial love in the family, at work, in society, because that is the way of God. Dare to carry your cross with hope, because we know that the cross does not lead to despair, but opens the door to the glory of the resurrection. The Passion and Cross of the Lord is a tragic love song, where love overcomes hatred, where death opens the door to life. From Golgotha, the words of forgiveness and love still echo forever, inviting each of us to follow, so that we can also say with St. Paul, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." The final message. The cross is not the end. It is the beginning of an eternal love. Jesus sacrificed himself out of love, taking on the sins of humanity, so that each of us can live and be free. Thank you for joining Sting Stories in today's story, The Passion and the Cross. We hope that through the journey of Jesus' passion and cross, each of us can feel more deeply his boundless love and sacrifice for humanity. We hope that this message will touch your heart, becoming a source of motivation to live more lovingly, forgive, and sacrifice more every day. If you find the story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sting Stories to continue listening to the next stories. Hello, and see you again in the next journey.